Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to this week's webinar. My name is Richard Orme. I'm from the DAISY Consortium, and I'm your host for today. Over the last few weeks, we've heard some great information about the revolution in born accessible digital publications and some new possibilities for educators, disability professionals, organizations, and authors to create accessible content. But how can individuals with print disabilities access these publications? Increasingly, people are making use of standard computers, tablets, and smartphones, using the assistive features that come built in or that can be added. This means that for accessible reading to be a reality, we're more and more reliant on the big technology companies paying attention to accessibility for everyone, to build assistive technologies into everyday technologies, and to partner with third parties. Last October, the face-to-face meetings of the DAISY Consortium were in the heart of Silicon Valley, and we made the best of this opportunity by meeting with many of the big tech companies who create the products and services that students, library users, and customers rely on. One of the wonderful presentations was about what Apple are doing, and I'm delighted that we can bring this information to a much broader group of people in this webinar. So it's my great pleasure to ask Sarah to introduce herself and tell us all about accessibility at Apple.
Hi there, I'm Sarah Hollinger and I lead Apple's accessibility efforts. In that role, my sort of two areas that I cover are both externally, making sure that people understand the depth and breadth of what we do around accessibility in our products and in everything that we do at Apple, from the products to our services, to our stores, to our workplace. And then I also work to ensure that every employee at Apple understands what accessibility means to us and the fact that accessibility is one of our 6 core corporate values, so that we end up with an army of individuals who are all working to make sure that everything that Apple does, it's available for everyone. At Apple, we believe that great technology is simple and intuitive and easy to use, but we also believe that exemplary technology is accessible. We view accessibility to be a basic human right, and therefore we build it into everything that we do. The reason for this, well, there's a few reasons for it. One of which is the numbers. We know that there are over 1 billion people on this planet who have some type of disability, whether that be a sensory disability around vision, hearing, or physical motor, or a more hidden disability involving elements of neurodiversity or learning and reading disabilities. That actually equates to 1 in 7 people on the planet, or about 15% of the world's population. As we drill down a little bit, and one of the things we also know here in the US is that 1 in 5 students has some type of learning or attention issue involving things like dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, but also other elements such as ADHD and executive function deficits, nonverbal learning disabilities, all kinds of things that are out there that can affect a student's ability to learn. And interestingly, one of the other things we note is that 1 in 10 students in the US is also an English language learner. We know that, certainly that is something that affects so many students in our education system today. And even beyond that, we know that regardless of how you cut the numbers, millions are unidentified or could just benefit from tools that support them as visual, auditory, or kinesthetic learners. At Apple, we strongly believe that technology can play a powerful role in helping people to be more productive, creative, collaborative, more motivated, more empowered and independent, to help foster dignity, and at the end of the day, to be able to live out their dreams. Nowhere is that more evident than our work in accessibility. So I'd like to take a moment and show a quick video that gives a little bit of more information on the depth and breadth of the kind of work that we do.
In a kitchen, we move to an open bedroom door. In the bedroom, Sadie Paulson is reflected in a mirror. A caregiver brushes her hair, then helps her into a blouse.
People think that having a disability is a barrier.
Sadie sits at a desk working with an iMac. She moves her head to operate switches on her headrest.
But that's not the way I see it.
Now, a young man uses sign language on a FaceTime call.
You can catch up with friends.
A young woman signs back. Now a family picnics.
Ready?
You can capture a moment with your family.
One face, small face, focus lock.
A blind man takes a photo with an iPhone.
And you can start the day bright and early.
A woman lies in bed using an iPhone app to open motorized curtains and turn on her lights. She lowers herself into a wheelchair.
You can take a trip to somewhere new.
A man hikes with friends. Now a close-up of his hearing aid. He stops to select the outdoor setting on his iPhone.
3 miles to the summit.
A boy reads a book on an iPad in class.
You can concentrate on every word of a story.
A bird began to sing. Jack opened his eyes.
An athlete selects outdoor wheelchair workout on her Apple Watch.
You can take the long way home.
A beach at sunset. The athlete pushes her wheelchair aggressively down a paved path, quickly gaining speed. Then the footage rewinds, revealing that it's being edited in Final Cut Pro.
Or edit a film like this one.
We zoom out to reveal Sadie editing the film. She uses her head to use switch control, navigating an on-screen keyboard.
When technology is designed for everyone,
She drags a clip and plays the film.
it lets anyone do what they love, including me.
Sadie laughs. Then a gray Apple logo appears on a white background. The logo disappears.
Video shown with captions and audio description in there. Couple of things on that one. It's worth noting that that video was actually edited by the woman shown in the video. When she said, you can edit a video like this one, she wasn't just saying that as a generalization. She was actually the principal video editor and is a woman with cerebral palsy who got her editing a degree in media from one of the top media schools in the country and has used it to become a professional video editor. And I think that is, one of or a great example of one of the reasons why we do what we do. We want to ensure that everyone who wants to use our technology has a means by which to do so. And so because of that, we kind of focus on two main design principles as we design our products. The first of which is that we build accessibility into the core of our products, into the operating systems. We don't rely on third parties to do accessibility for us, and we don't bolt it on as an afterthought. It is a part of our DNA that as we design our products, we try and think about how anyone who would want to use them has the opportunity for such. The other thing that we do, though, is we also focus on creating a cohesive ecosystem. And we are the only company out there that controls our own hardware, software, and operating systems. And so we can infuse accessibility in ways that other people may not be thinking about. For example, if you take something like Voiceover, if you have a student or a child whose first interaction with Apple technology is using, say, an iPad. Well, we were actually the first company in the world to make a touchscreen accessible to the blind by building the Voiceover screen reader into iOS. We did this in 2009. So this is something that is actually quite robust and has been on for a long time on, within our operating system. And we've iterated year over year to make it better. And I'll talk a little bit more about it a little later on in this, but to sort of focus on that element of VoiceOver on the iPad. When we did this, we didn't build it specifically for the iPad. We built it for iOS, meaning that if someone then picked up an iPhone or an iPod Touch, they would have the same experience as they've had on that iPad. But then when we realized how much the blind community was gravitating to VoiceOver on iOS, and public statistics right now tell us that about 69% of the blind community using a mobile device is using an iOS device. When we realized that how much they gravitated to this, we looked at our Macs and the trackpads that we have for our Macs and realized that we could port all of those gestures available on iOS to the trackpad on the Mac as well. And then at about the same time, we were starting to work on the Apple Watch. And so we looked at how do we take those same gestures and port them to the Apple Watch. And then the Siri remote on Apple TV, and even with our HomePods and the top, which is essentially a touch-based device. So by building it into all of these different areas, what that means is if you learn VoiceOver on any one of our devices, you've essentially learned VoiceOver on every one of our devices. And in terms of supporting a community for whom memorization can be such an important part of their lives, this gives us a way of being able to give that seamless continuity across every product that we make. VoiceOver is just one example of this. We certainly look at building other accessibility features across all of our products as well. But it's something that only we can do because we are able to really look at how do we build, how do we have one team that's building these features for all of our products? So it's not separate product teams that do, a separate UI for each one of these. There's continuity across everything that we're doing. Now, when we talk about accessibility, we actually consider this across a really broad range. We don't see accessibility as being about compliance, and so we aren't looking at one thing as sort of checking a box. We really define accessibility in broad strokes, and therefore we look at it, but we do put them into 4 broad pillars, which are vision, hearing, motor, and cognitive. And in each of these areas, we see accessibility as a spectrum. So for example, under vision, that could be anyone from someone who is fully blind to other types of vision challenges, to just being an eyeglass wearer, or even just being colorblind. For hearing, it's everything from being able to, for someone who is profoundly deaf, to someone with age-related hearing loss, to even situational hearing loss of loud restaurants or loud spaces in general. With motor, it's everything from someone who might be a quadriplegic and, for example, may never even touch a touch screen, to someone who might have a tremor or low muscle strength. It could be that you only have one single access point, so maybe you can only use one finger total to use a device, or a toe. We look at short-term disabilities or things like having broken an arm, or even, once again, situational, having your arms full of, say, groceries when you walk up to your front door and trying to get your front door open. HomeKit can be great for that, some of the tools we have around automating a house. And then in cognitive and learning and literacy, we look at a lot of areas from neurodiversity around things like autism or dyslexia to other types of learning and reading challenges, developmental delays, just a lot of different things that we try to do in order to be able to support a wide range of users. We even look at things like vestibular motion and how motion on a screen might affect a user. And so trying to look at ways to really just simplify everything. Because at the end of the day, one of the things that we always try and focus on is that regardless of whether one self-identifies as having a disability or not, every person on the planet's usage of technology is unique. We all customize and personalize our devices to the ways that work best for each of us. And so we want to make sure that regardless of what your individual needs are, there's a scaffold available to you to help make your experience using our technology better. And so because of that, we work to build in a wealth of accessibility features across all of our products to support a wide array of individual use cases and needs. I'm going to take a few minutes to talk through a few of these so that you have a better understanding of some of those tools that are built in to support vision and reading challenges. The first thing I want to talk about is Voiceover. So Voiceover is a full-featured screen reader. It's incredibly robust. As I mentioned, we actually built the first iteration of this in 2009, or launched it in 2009. And one of the things that's been incredibly important to us through the years is to continue to iterate on Voiceover. We do that both by not only making sure that everything that every other engineer does at Apple is made to be accessible so that our users who are blind have access to all of the surprise and delight that everyone gets every year, but that we also work on features within Voiceover so that there's something new for our users year over year as well. And so over time, what that has meant is that we have a lot of features that are built in. Voiceover supports over 35 languages. It supports over 70 models of Bluetooth refreshable Braille displays to be connected to the device. Another feature, though, worth noting, the image that is on the screen right now is of something we call Braille screen input. That's actually a feature that we built in 6 years ago to allow someone who is blind, to enable them to be able to type directly onto the face of an iOS device using 6 or 8 dot Braille. We support over 80 models, or excuse me, 80 international Braille tables. So that Braille screen input is very robust and would support a lot of different languages for different use cases. And so it's something that we find users have really embraced as members of the blind community. One of the other things I want to show, though, is in regards to math and data. One of the other things that we've supported for years is MathML, in support of having individuals who are blind being able to read and parse through different complex equations. But one of the things we just launched this past year is some work in terms of sonification of charts and graphs. So I'm going to run a quick demo of this sonification. And it's just going to give you an idea of how the system gives additional information around a graph on the screen.
Temperature versus miles hiked. Temperature, Fahrenheit, 57, miles hiked, 17. Siri, data comprehension. Describe chart, play audio graph. Complete. Describe data series. Decreasing, linear, very strong association, no outliers.
So that's just an example of some of the things that can be done with that sonification. It is something we're really excited about to have in here in support of students who want to work in the STEM realm, ensuring that they're able to continue in science and mathematics and engineering in a way to, that works for them, and that the content that they work with is always accessible. This type of sonification works right now on iOS in things like Pages, Keynote, Numbers. It works with health data on a device. It also works in things like the stocks app. So in working with financial stock information, great way to hear kind of what's going on today in the market. Moving on to another one of our features, Speak Screen. Speak Screen is a text-to-speech, giving the option to be able to speak or have text spoken back while you're on a page. This can work with anything from an email or any text on a screen to reading full books. The action is to do a 2-finger swipe down from the top of the screen once you enable Speak Screen in settings. And then it will pretty much just read everything from that point on until you ask it to, or tell it to stop by tapping. You'll see on the screen right now is an image of Speak Screen, and it shows the Speak Screen menu that shows up when you enable it, that would give you the opportunity to be able to pause, move forward, backward, whatever you need to do while you're using it. One of the other things that Speak Screen has, though, that I really love is being able to do highlighting. And that can be done as either word by word or sentence by sentence or both together. You can choose the color that you would want to do the highlighting, and it moves seamlessly along the, as you move through content. And that multimodality is such a great feature because for students who, for example, have dyslexia, great opportunity to be able to not only have the words spoken out to you, but also be able to have words highlighted and see that as it's being spoken for better comprehension. There was a study that was done back in the 80s. It was called the 32 million word gap that I've kind of looked at a little bit in regards to tools like Speak Screen and text-to-speech. When this was done, they actually did the study to look at families that came from lower income families to middle income and then high income earners, and kind of looking at the fact that children in the different groups were exposed to very different levels of spoken words per hour. And in fact, what they found was that in the, what they sort of referred to as professional homes, they were exposed to an average of more than 1,500 words an hour than those who were in the lower income homes. And over 1 year, that amounted to a difference of about 8 million words, which by the time children were getting into preschool gave a gap of about 32 million words. And they also found that there was a gap in terms of tone and the complexity of those words that were being used. Regardless of whether one would look at this and see it as a total of 32 million words or something, less, more, whatever it might be, just that element of not having that exposure is so important in terms of being able to prepare a child for later on in life, and having that knowledge of words and the complexity of words throughout time. So really sort of looking at text-to-speech not just as a tool for reading disabilities, but also looking at this as a tool for early childhood development. And also we're seeing it used for language learners. whether that be here in the US, and the statistic I had earlier on around 1 in 10 students in the US is an English language learner, but really for any language, just being able to get, to improve that reading comprehension. And once again, that multimodality of having the words be able to be highlighted on the screen while you are trying to learn that language can be really valuable as well. Another tool, being able to invert colors. Whether this be done through tools like Smart Invert or Dark Mode on the device, being able to provide a version that is lighter letters on a dark background. There's some research that's shown that this can be beneficial for individuals with reading disabilities. Some of it might just be personal preference. Whichever way you are better able to take in the information and have that comprehension of, whether it be dark letters on a white background or white letters on a black background, just gives, once again, that ability to personalize your usage and customize it in a way that works best for you. Even for individuals who don't self-identify as having a disability, one of the other things we find is this is a great tool for night reading. Could potentially cut down on some of the night or the eye strain that you would have from a bright screen in a dark room. So just a way to help if for any type of a reader who's trying to better work with information in a dark area. And then also a feature called Safari Reader. For anyone who is unfamiliar with Safari Reader, this is a great feature that's built into the Safari web browser. As you go to say to a news outlet and go to read articles, often we find that while the article may be a fantastic read, surrounding the article is all kinds of other information that may pull your eyes away from what you're trying to read. So, for example, it could be ads that are running or animated GIFs or, whatever, tons of different types of material that would keep an individual from keeping their attention on and staying focused on the content that you want them to be reading. So with Safari Reader, by tapping on the set of letters of the two A's at the top of the screen, you can invoke Safari Reader, and you can actually set it so that anytime you go to a page that can actually use Safari Reader, it will automatically convert over. So this just clears out all the clutter on the page and leaves only the content of the article, along with any media that is associated with that article. But it means that all of those ads or links to other elements at the bottom of the screen, other articles that might be written, things like that, all get kind of pushed away. So it just comes down to the content that you want to be focused on. And within that Safari Reader option, you can also do things like choose the text size that you want to be using. You can change the way that it shows up. So whether you want that to be with the black letters on a white background or different elements of black to gray to sepia. So a lot of different options you can use to be able to read something a little bit more effectively. And tools like Safari Reader work really well with VoiceOver and Speak Screen. So having both of those as options for auditory reinforcement, as well as while you're using Safari Reader on a page.
Sarah, this is great information. I know you've got a lot more. We've got some great questions coming through. So what do you think? Maybe another 10 minutes or so of the presentation and then leave some time for questions? How does that sound?
I think that seems just about right with what I've got here. So hopefully I will hit that on the dot if I can.
Perfect. Please continue.
Maybe even a few minutes early. So these are just a few of the features that are available to support a wide range of use cases, but in particular, those who may be blind or low vision or have reading challenges. So when looking at reading books or other content, just great tools to enable on your devices to make sure that you or the students that you work with have the opportunity to be able to take in that information really fluidly. So a couple other programs that I want to bring up before I move to Q&A as well. One of those is a program called Everyone Can Code that's built around some of the work we've done with Swift Playgrounds. So we created Swift Playgrounds, which is an app to teach coding to individuals. And it is an app that was designed to be sort of game-based. The idea behind it is that you are trying to move through a series of puzzle worlds and complete puzzles. And as you are doing so, you are learning to code and putting in sort of the coding elements in order to get the characters in these games to move through and accomplish the goals that they're trying to do. And when we built this in 2016, we actually built it to be fully accessible. And so we were finding out that we're, working with schools, finding out that there were students who were blind, deaf, or had physical motor limitations that were using this to learn to code. But as time went by, we actually felt that there was more that we could do. So in 2018, we started a program to really look at not only all of the resources that were currently available for every school and making sure that those were fully accessible, not just from the perspective of whether a screen reader user could use them, but also just that every activity was done in a way that would give you options to learn to code using activities that were accessible to all, but also looking at whether there were additional resources that we might build that would be helpful too. So we actually worked to build a couple of additional Swift Playgrounds resources, which included things like tactile puzzle world maps. So as you're moving through all of these different puzzle worlds or levels in order to learn to code, we made actual brailled materials that were images of these puzzle worlds. So a student could follow along with, feeling out what the puzzle was, where the character starts out, what it is they're trying to accomplish, and then be able to use that with Voiceover to then go through the process of whatever that stage, whatever that level of the game would be. So something that, for some students, they may work solely with the information on the device and be fine. For others, they may want that additional resource of having an actual tactile puzzle map. And those are available through a couple of different resources. In the United States, you can get them through the Lighthouse for the Blind in San Francisco. RNIB over in the UK has been producing them for the European market. They are available in UEB, and you can also, if you have your own embosser, you can download the BRF files from our website so that you could produce them as well for your own students. We also developed videos in American Sign Language as well to support this, and worked with two great engineers from the app Lift, who are members of the deaf community, who talk about how they got into engineering and coding, and then how to explain a lot of the the things that you need to know in order to really get the most out of coding. So really looked at creating resources that were not just for the general public, but that it looked at these audiences as being unique and what might be tools that would best support the learning experiences of those students. The slide that's up right now is actually a quick image of a drone flying above a group of students in the middle of a library. This was actually done at the Texas School for the Blind. We came in and did a workshop around Everyone Can Code with the students there. And within an hour of just getting through a couple of levels on Swift Playgrounds, they had taken what they were learning in that and actually applied it to a couple of drones that we brought with us. And so these were the students who were already learning how to control drones, and same with robots and all kinds of things. So there's a lot of really cool things that can be done with the Learn to Code or the Everyone Can Code resources to help students really get a foothold in the realm of coding. Another program I want to bring up really quickly is called Everyone Can Create. And this is a program that focuses more on the creative side of what we do at Apple. It's really about recognizing the power of creativity and the fact that there is an artist in all of us. We know that it can have a profound impact on self-expression and communication. And we see this on multiple fronts. From individuals, from autistic individuals to those with intellectual and development delays, those with sensory disabilities, all just kinds of different things where conventional verbal communication might not be the right fit for sharing and expressing oneself. It could be that written communication isn't the best modality either. Some students are just better able to communicate when they're doing their work in a creative format, creating a video or a song or something. So this really taps into everyone, or those elements around creating and in the Everyone Can Create world. So I encourage you to look at both of those programs, which you can find in the education area of Apple's website. Really quickly, just a couple last things. We definitely see that the intersection of our values of education and accessibility is around equitable learning. We believe that technology should be a benefit, not a hindrance, and really help leveling the playing field. And that if we can really teach kids how to use technology and turn it into a valuable toolkit, that it's something that will help support them for life. Couple quick resources before I jump into Q&A. There are some great things that we've done around remote learning in this time frame. One of them is the App Store has a number of great collections to support educators and parents. That includes everything from things like the Learn and Study from Home, remote learning for institutions, to an accessibility app, an apps for accessibility collection that we have available as well. There's also an education learning series with a growing series of videos designed to help educators to use the built-in features of their Apple products. This does include a couple of great videos around accessibility, so that's a great thing to check out as well. We're also doing different types of virtual conferences that are led by Apple professional learning specialists. These are follow-ups to the on-demand learning series videos that we have. So those run for about 30 minutes each and give an opportunity for educators to engage in dialogues with the team about the content that's there. And then there's also the Apple Teacher Learning Center, which is a free self-paced professional learning program that offers unlimited access to learning materials and content on how to use technology in education. So there's lesson ideas and tools to learn how to use the iPad, the Mac, and different types of apps to engage students. I'm going to end on this slide and just leave it up for a little bit as we start to move into Q&A. This gives you an idea of a number of the different resources we have that are available to everyone. Apple.com/accessibility is our sort of subset site under Apple.com that covers all of the depth and breadth of our accessibility features. So you can find out a lot more than what I've talked about today. Accessibility@apple.com is a customer-facing email address. So if you have future questions, please feel free to write us there. We also do have phone support at 877-204-3930 in the US, and there are also options that are available in other areas around the globe too. So I'd recommend looking at the Contact Us page on apple.com to find what's available in your area. And then lastly, our Apple Support Twitter handle gives information around how to use our technology in general, but often gives some interesting tips and tricks on the accessibility features of our products. So definitely recommend subscribing to that and following us along. And with that, Richard, did you want to share a few of the questions?
Absolutely, and there are quite a few, so let's see how quickly we can move through them. The usual style, Sarah, is we'll start at kind of high level and then we'll dive a little bit deeper into some topics. So at the beginning of your presentation, you talked about the numbers of people globally with disabilities, and it's often said that people with disabilities, most of them live in developing countries. I wondered if there was anything you could share with us about any efforts to ensure that folk in less well-resourced areas get access to some of these amazing technologies.
Yeah, I think in general, we, as a global company, we are always working to ensure that our technology is available in as many places as we possibly can. So, our view is as long as we have the option and the ability to work with a country to set up sales, to be able to get all of the proper elements in place, that we want to make sure that our technology is available as many places as we possibly can.
Thank you. And a linked question from Gradimir. Gradimir asks about voices for new languages or maybe less commonly spoken languages in some parts of the world, for example, Serbian or Croatian. How does one go about adding that capability in? Support for text-to-speech is something that comes up often on our webinars.
Yeah, I would say probably the best thing that you could do would be to write to accessibility@apple.com and share what your priority languages are, so that we can take a look at what is feasible. We've continued to add voices to the operating systems in general over the years, and we want to always make sure that we're doing that with the best resources that we can, but always happy to look at where there is opportunity for improvement. So please share some of those through the accessibility@apple.com account, and I'll make sure the team gets them to the right people to take a look at.
Thank you. Thanks also for that demonstration you did of the graph sonification. That was great. Matthew asks, where's the data coming from that was processed by that? And was that available, linked question, in other apps like maybe Apple Books or something like that?
So the data is data that has been input as part of that graph. So sort of behind the scenes is where you would input, as you're creating a graph, say in Pages, you're given what is on the columns and rows, x-axis, y-axis. So that is inputted in, and then the output is what shows up in the graph. Hopefully I answered that one, if that was what you were getting at. And then in terms of where it's available, it is available in in all of the sort of the iWork elements, pages, numbers, and Keynote. But at this stage, I would say it's not yet available in books, but we do understand the value of that. So I think we're, we don't talk about unreleased product, but we do understand there is definite value to making that happen. So.
Great. Sticking with books for a couple more questions. Katie asks about using books on an iPad, noticing that alternative text for images isn't read by Voiceover. Is it something that Katie needs to switch on, or is it something you're working on?
I would be curious to know what type of book that is. And so Katie, if you as well wouldn't mind sending that to accessibilityapple.com so we can check on it, because in theory with Voiceover on, if there is an accessible description, it should be read out. It is something that has been built into first iBooks Author and then Pages for the export to books. But I would have to take a look at whether that's something that you are creating, or whether it's coming from an external source, or whether it's sort of what it was built in. But our goal is certainly to be able to read out all accessible descriptions. So it may be a bug or a way that something's been produced, but we can definitely have some folks take a look at it, so that if it is a bug in a specific type of document, that we could take a look at trying to fix it.
Thank you. Richard, not me, another Richard, also has a comment that's related to books. Richard says that learning the Mac was so much easier for him because he was able to use the trackpad functions, which is the same as the touchscreen. You mentioned this in your presentation. But Richard wonders what work is being done to ensure that the apps themselves behave the same across the different platforms, so the user experience is more consistent.
I assume you're referring to third-party apps, or
no? He mentioned books, so he found it great that he could use the touchpad and use all the learning he had of using the touch screen. But when he used books on the Mac, he found the experience was quite different to using it on the iPad or iPhone. This is what I interpret from Richard's question.
Got it. Okay. Well, I can take a look at some of the differences. It may be that the same gestures work across, but the way that something works in just how it's optimized for one operating system or another may be slightly different. With that being said, there are more and more apps that are being developed with a base of iOS to work on the Mac, which helps to port accessibility. And that's why I was asking Apple or third party. It would apply to both. But being able to create an app and have it port over to the other operating system and bring accessibility with it. So all of those hooks for VoiceOver or switch control or voice control or any of the kinds of things that we build in, allowing those to port over. And so with that being said, we are starting to see more synergy coming up for most apps out there. So we're certainly working to try and make the experience, if not the same, given once again, there may be differences on operating systems that just make it better to have there be some differences. But something that at least brings the accessibility and gives an experience that's fluid across both.
And here's a related question from Marcia. Marcia says, apps still make it to the App Store inaccessible. Is there a requirement, or what's the process for apps to go through some sort of accessibility checklist before they're allowed onto the platform?
So we work with developers pretty closely on giving them all of the tools to make an app accessible through the APIs that we have available. So a lot of things that developers can do to make their apps accessible, and then to test for it through the accessibility inspector. We've also, this past year, worked on a tool to help kind of, for developers who don't make their apps as accessible as we would like, to help them in that cause by using machine learning to identify elements within apps that may have otherwise been inaccessible. So imagine if it's a video playing app that it says, play, or it says button, possibly play as an option. So really working to take apps that aren't as accessible as we would hope them to be, and kind of take that heavy lifting off so that we can just help the community have a better experience.
Great. So we just to illustrate, we have a global audience. Taran asks a question saying that he encounters problems with Voiceover pronouncing some words in his language, which is Hindi. How does that feedback find its way into Apple? What's the best way for him to do that?
Once again, I would say use the accessibility@apple.com email address, and we love details. So if there are specific words that you would have as an example, that would be great for our team to understand where the biggest pain points are. And as we work with individuals who are native speakers of those languages within the company through our localization teams and accessibility around the globe, that helps us to make sure we're giving a good starting place for people to check on that, and then help us as we try and fix those problems.
We've had a surprising number of questions relating to people who are developing Braille devices and looking to get support and ensure that they provide support to folk using Apple technologies. What's the best way for them to go about that?
Well, I would say the first step is to look at the Braille HID that was developed industry-wide. I believe it was in 2019. This was a sort of standardized human interface guideline around support of Braille, which codified a lot of the different commands and such, in order to both make it something where if you're using that HIG, it would seamlessly connect across products industry-wide. So whether you are using an iPhone or a Mac, or even some other type of product, that you could do that sort of seamless plug and play by having this one standard element, and then once again codifying kind of across some of the other elements, so that it creates ease of use for any Braille user. And that is available out in the world, and something that we worked with. Really everybody in the industry got together, whether it be the manufacturers of the consumer products, or the Braille displays, or the screen reader manufacturers, to make sure we had something that covered the needs of everyone. So I would say, starting with that, we are looking at that as sort of our baseline now for future additions to our list of Braille displays that we support. That's the first question that gets asked is, did you build this to the HIG specifications? So I would start there.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for rattling through so many of those answers and helping us get towards the top of the hour. And the image you showed of those blind students at the Texas School for the Blind with the drone over the top of their heads, the sheer joy on their faces will be something that will last with me for a long time. Okay, we're coming to the end of this session. Sarah, thank you again for sharing your wonderful insights and information. And thank you to everyone who's joined us for today's webinar. Coming up in the next few weeks, we have some more wonderful topics for you. On June the 3rd, it will be the second part of our feature exploring the revolution in born accessible digital publications, the future of accessible publishing and standards, where are we going? And on June the 10th, we'll be learning about some legislation that will impact on one of the world's largest marketplaces, the European Accessibility Act, considerations for the publishing industry and benefits to consumers globally. On June the 17th, in response to many questions or requests for this topic, we have describing images in publications, guidance, best practices, and the promise of technology. You can find out more information at daisy.org/webinars, where you can also sign up to the webinar announcements mailing list to learn about new topics as we add them. And if you would like to suggest a subject, or if you are considering presenting a webinar, then please email us at webinars@daisy.org. I hope you'll join us again next week. In the meantime, thank you for your time and have a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye.